right, so let's go over week 5, day 9. So for today, there's several steps you need to do, but I think very doable and hopefully very fun because I know it was fun for me to implement the following things into my app. And I termed this day Own Your App because of some of the stuff we were talking about in class about don't be a script kiddie, know what you're doing, know what the code is doing, and especially know how to modify your layout. So the first thing I say is add a cover image, but this could really be any image, but a cover image really makes sense, especially at this beginning stage when you're creating your look and feel of your app. So into your existing, any of the sections, and what I mean by that is your layout sections like your header, your nav, your article, your aside. And then I give you a link here to scaling images. So let me show you how mine came out. So, oh, before I show you though, do know because we are academia, right? We can use images.google.com. And then for me, I just started looking for items related to my topic and found it took me a little while to go through and find some. And the key was I wanted to find a nice quality graphic that fit into what I was going for. Okay, so then I saved that once I found it. Now this is not the one I used, although this one's pretty awesome. One thing you do here is once you find it, wow, I might change. No, I don't like that one as much. But anyway, the idea is you save image as. Now this is a really large image. You're going to want to modify this size wise, but then you would navigate to your wherever your repo is, right? And then I want you to create, oh, wrong one. I want you to create a new subdirectory in your repo. I ended up doing this one in my Rio Waller and my app. Okay, so I created a new image directory, right? And I ended up using a different image, but the idea is there. You place it into that directory, okay? And then there's built-in tools. There's tools online if you need help with how to edit images. You know, you can chat with me. But again, that would be a skill I would hope you'd come in with. All right, so save that to the images directory. And then what I did is I modified the CSS to reference that. So let me go ahead and drop out here and show you what it looked like. So for me, this was the image I chose for my header. And I'll just right click inspect to show you what I ended up doing here. So if I click on this and I look at my CSS, I first see that I also modified, which is something we'll come up here to in a minute to, is also modifying my font and my content, my color, to match a palette that we'll talk about. But so first you see a header that's on a div that I created in there, right? And then if I scroll down, you can see farther down. Let me see where did I place that? Oh, sorry, it's on the header itself. That's what I was looking for, where I actually included that image. There it is. Okay. Oh, 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 oh. Not sure what happened there. Oh, it was trying to open that. So what I did is I modified for me there's a header footer section. So I modified this to include background image, repeat, size, and position. I did give you a link to an MDN article about scaling background images and different ways to do it and different thinking on that. So that's how I did it. Now and I haven't modified it, but I plan to, but because my header and footer have the same CSS, what happens there is I also get that same image on my footer, which in this case I was okay with. I thought I wouldn't, but I actually do kind of like that. Okay, so I'm not showing you exactly, but I kind of did through developer tools how to place that in your CSS. The other thing is I want you all to select a font. Many of you already have, but some of you have not, besides Roboto, and implement that into your CSS. Okay, so and I've given you a link to fonts.google.com. That's fairly straightforward. Putting that up in your body would be appropriate. So the next thing you want to do here is determine your app color palette and create a new file with your colors and then update your My App with it. So I give you two links. There are many others out there. This one, Cooler, I used. It was really fun. So I went through and it started exploring the different palettes they had. They didn't have a huge amount, latest one, best ones. But when I found one I liked, I just did a view on it and then I could see the different colors itself. Okay. So find a palette. The other one, this one, Rick recommendation was Color Lovers, and this one's really fun too. Has many more, and you can go through and look at the different ones. So once you find one, what I want you to do, and here's the page I created in my app, and I called it Colors. And then I said my application color palette, and then I laid in the colors that I'm using. Okay, if you want to see just briefly here how I did this is I used the same CSS as I used in my index file. Okay, but what I did is I modified it to only include articles, so that my header, and then what I did is I created a new style up in here because this style will only be used in this particular page. So this is why it makes sense to have inline style. And then for each one, I use that style. Now you can do this however you want. I'm not going to dictate, as long as when I look at it, I can clearly see your palette. So then for each one, on the item, I place the color, right? So the idea is that you can look at this and see what your color palette is and then play with it. So then what I did is I modified my app for these colors. Okay, so my background color on here, my color here, it may look white, but it's actually that platinum color. I use that platinum color here. I modified my buttons to include those colors. Okay, so that's the part you need to do here. So first, create your file, your new file called color or colors.html in your My App directory, and then place somehow, however you want, in there those colors. So you have a color palette now to play with and implement into your app. So now each section, next one is each section of your app each section of your site needs a purpose in your My App. So provide content and or remove sections. So each one needs to have something that it's doing, right? And right now what we've been doing is just having buttons that then reflect content. But what you really need to do, and I'll tell you, a couple people like Patrick did a really nice job here and Lizzie did a nice job, and if you want, on Tuesday before we start, I can show you some of their examples. So the idea is that, having a button that replaces content is fine, but you really need something that shows the user more of what, your app is doing or what you plan on doing here. The other thing we could talk about is something called user stories, but for now, right, this is a thing you need to think about. So for me, what I ended up doing is I dropped out, and not you don't have to do this, I did for me. I dropped out my aside because I wanted this really to be where I place in the information after the user logs in. Okay, so this is going to become populated. By the time you see it, I will have some more icons and data and stuff that will reflect what the user would see once they log in. But everything needs to have a purpose. So my heading has a purpose of just broadcasting what the app is, carbon footprint. That's okay. It actually, by visually, you can tell what it's doing. It's presenting what the user is looking at. And the nice thing about the way these responsive images work is that when you resize, and it's a little hard to do with my mouse, but now you can see on mine, I actually probably need to make it a little less large, and I need to do this, is actually figure out how to make my font scale as well. So that'll be another fun thing that I'll work on with that. Okay. All right, so now we get into that. So that's kind of, and I'll maybe break this out. That's actually doing more of owning the app, making it your own. So now we're going to do two exercises related to arrays, because this is what you're learning. So review your variables that you created. So many of you just moved them into the global space like I showed, and then refactor or create new some of them into at least two arrays, and then modify your functions to reference the newly created arrays, and then console log those arrays. So I'll show you an instance of how I did one of them. So in my app, let me just show you my code real quick. No, I'm not sure what that was asking. Okay, so what I did is this the one? JS. Oh, actually, I did this on a different repo. Let me show you on the other one. Hold on just a second. Let me pull up that one. Actually, I had in here. I ended up working. Let's do a new window just to show you the JS for this. Okay. Hold on. Let me find it. Okay, so this is the shared with everyone that I was playing with where I implemented this. So I took, because I had a previous usage and current usage, so I ended up creating var usage, made an array you do with brackets, separated each one with a comma. And then what I did is I modified my output then to reference the items in that array. Okay, so with your free code camp, hopefully you have down the concept of you reference the array and in brackets it's a zero based index, so it's 0 for the first item and then 1 for the second item. Okay, so create 2 of these, right? And then console.log that output so you have it. All right, so that's the next step you need to do for that one. So do 2 of those and then console.log the arrays, which let me just show you. Actually, I'm going to show you in the next one, so I'll do that as well. So now the next one is taking this to the next level, which is to refactor one of your functions. I use login to push the form data into an empty array and console.log the new populated array. And I gave you a link here to mdn array.push. Okay. So let me just show you what it does. As I come in here, it's my user login. So if I type in a name, and then I did want to go ahead and make that a password field. And when I click login, it goes away, but I'm going to go ahead and go down to inspect, right? And I'm going to go to console. So I ended up using a array called user data. So right now, because I've placed that in there, I've pushed these 2 items in here. So, but now let me show you just briefly here. So now when the page first loads, that array is empty, right? So user data, oh, I didn't do it right, user data, there's nothing in there. That's what a blank array is, okay? And so you just define an array before your function. And in this case, let me pull this down just a little bit, right? So if I do Rio, and then I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, and I log in, now when I do that user data, it shows that item because I've pushed that into there. Now, how would you do that? You first set up your form, right? And then you define you have to have an index. So let me just, the idea was actually I didn't want to show you all of this because I wanted you to play with it. But in here, right? So I've set up a function here to save the user data. I've created the but I want you to make this, by the way, your own again. The user data, the empty array, and then let's look at the HTML. So here's my form. It's got a ID in it, and I use this so I can hide it. I have an action that's calling the function save login, input, and I gave it an ID, text, placeholder, just so you can see what needs to go there, and then password, and I made it password. Oh, actually this one needs to come out. This, I don't know what I did here. It's actually right here. It says save user data. This must have been a lag from something else when I was playing around. So it's actually right here on the button where it says on click save user data that runs the CSS, or sorry, runs the JavaScript, which is save user data right here that runs. So I target those by the get element ID. I place them into a variable for each of the items I want, the username, the user password. I have to give it a new variable name, and then I do the user push. Now I have to do the dot value to reference that, and that's what I wanted to show you because I want you to know how to do this. So if I look, so going back to here, if I was to try to figure out in the dev console how to see that, right? Let's just do like I showed you before, document dot get element by ID, right? Not class. I have a fun little keyboard thing happening. I gotta fix it. So now I have to know the ID that I was looking for, right? The ID is, again, this is nothing new. We've done this before. Just you figuring out and knowing how this stuff works. As far as when these commands run, what is it doing? It's looking down at the document. It's looking at the ID. So the ID I'd want to look at in this case, not my template, that's something else I was playing with earlier. So when I look at the code real quick, so the ID we're looking at, right, is on that form data, right? So then you look just to make sure you've named it. So it'd be username. Okay, so that's what I was trying to show you. Okay, so that targets that item. And then what you'd want to do is do on the, once you assign that into a variable, then you can do dot value to get that value, right? So user, is it input I said? I just have to remember my variable names real quick, right? So in this case, the ID is username, and then when I created the variables, it was username input. Okay, so I used that to denote those items. So I could say user input, user name input dot value. Is that right? Oh, I haven't run. Yeah, I did run it, so it should be there. So this is where learning how username input should be there. Oh, because of the way I'm referencing it, right? But hopefully you get the idea here is that then you'll want to create those variable names and then you just push them. User data dot push, and then it pushes because user data refers to the array and then the two variables that you've set up, right? And then I used another get element by on the login to make it not visible so it goes away, right? I know that got a little convoluted at the end, but the idea is to just give you an example here and an implementation of how you would possibly use the array. Okay? All right, let's see. I think and then that will also be, let me just do it one more time here and I'll do a little different data. Inspect, right, console. So then the user data is the one that you will then user data is the array, so you would do console.log. That's what I was trying to show you earlier, just to say, because on both of them you need to do it, right? Now you need to put this in your code. I'm just showing you here. So then you can place that into your code so that I see that you have indeed understood the concept of what to do. All right. All right, so I know this can seem a little involved here at the end, but really I've shown you the code here, but the idea is for you too, and here's my requirement on this particular one, is that each line you need to add comments so that I know you know what each line is doing. And if you don't, go research it and figure out what it's doing. But I hope after at least the explanation, even though it was kind of popped around a little bit, still gave you the idea. All right, see you next week.